We're live, right? All right, cool. Hey guys, my name is Sean, and I'm joined here with Aaron Kasperlak.
How's it going? It's good to be here. Good to commentate on some Legacy.
Yeah, and we're gonna be just about to start round 6 featuring Romario versus Anuraag, and this should be pretty exciting. It's classic combo versus control, a little bit different variants from what we've been used to the last few years. But Romario's gonna be on the Epic Storm, which I believe everyone sees here on the screenshot. And it's a pretty stock list, very similar to what Bryant Cook has been playing with recently, including that sideboard island. And Anuraag's deck is, I guess, labeled as not miracles here. And getting that pulled up real quick. But because Sensei's Divine Top got banned, he's got to replace a lot of the miracle cards and some of the control elements with more counter magic and more removal, but not as powerful as Terminus. So how do you see this playing out, Aaron?
Well, traditionally I like Miracles in this matchup, but obviously Anuraag is not playing Miracles.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would give the edge to the Storm player, just because with Miracles, a lot of the advantage obviously came from Sensei's Divining Top and Counterbalance, but without that combo, it can be a little bit rough. And Sensei's Divining Top kind of did double duty as well, where you could hide sort of your important counter magic, like your forces and post-board fluster storms and that kind of stuff from discard spells. So
Yeah,
you can kind of just blow them out. But since Anurag is sort of playing fair with everything known in his hand, I think the discard spells will be very effective in this matchup.
I agree. I think one of the trickiest things for Storm was to both navigate the counterbalance lock, but also the possibility of the Miracles player, which Anuraag was very proficient at, floating something like a Flusterstorm or a hard counter on top of their library. That's not going to be available to Anuraag anymore. So you can see in the sideboard he's compensating with a lot more hate, especially the Aethersworn Canis, 3 copies, which you would have never seen in Miracles outside of when Dig Through Time was popular and only as a one of then at most.
Yeah, I think the
Uh,
canonists are like a pretty big deal in the sideboard because like usually the way to beat Storm is to have some sort of combination of disruption with counter magic plus hate bears
mhm.
or counter magic plus discard. Usually just one of those things isn't good enough.
Yeah, I agree. Storm decks, especially proficient players such as Romario, are going to be very used to punching through a wall of counter magic. So you need some combination of counter magic, permanent base disruption, quick clock, discard, etc. And Anurag's going for in the form of just some hate bearers, a couple of surgical extractions, but mostly just a lot of counter magic.
And Romario's not playing anything like Hercule's Recall or it's just Chain of Vapors.
I believe he has one in the sideboard, but that's not tutorable off of Burning Wish.
Yeah.
Let's see if we get that list pulled up again. I'm having trouble. Got the old lists prior to the BNR announcement. Yeah, there we go. There's 2 Hercules recalls on the sideboard. So those are cards
Okay.
that can be boarded in. I'm not sure you necessarily want them just for the canonists and maybe some artifacts like engineered explosives. Batter Skull is a very good way to beat Empty the Warrens, but it's a bit slow. Looks like the player's about to start here, and the opening 7s are ready. Romario looks like he's on the play. So
Okay.
looks like Romario's got a little bit of a slow hand. I can't make out that 7th card on up top. Oh, looks like it's another
It's
Dark
a
Ritual.
yeah.
So no action yet, but the Epic Storm plays 8 business spells plus ad nauseum, and I guess Empty the Warrens can potentially count as one too. Anurag here has a spell snare of Snapcaster Mage and a Force of Will. So
I
some
like Romario's hand in this spot actually, just
Mhm.
because he knows that Anurag's not going to be doing a whole lot in the early game. Like he'll be trying to sculpt his hand. And the issue with Anurag's hand is he doesn't have any cantrips.
Well, he just found one, the
Okay.
best one in fact.
That's a pretty good draw.
Yeah. Um, So interesting here, like when you don't know what your opponent's on, often turn 1 probe is a good way to get some information about what you need to play around. But saving the Jet Taxium probe until the last moment allows you to build Storm on the fundamental turn as well as find out what their final hand that you have to beat is. When there's not something like a counterbalance that could come down on turn 2 and make your timing on Jetaxian probe awkward, it's often wise to hold on to it, which looks like Romario's electing to do. Fires off this brainstorm and hits Burning Wish, and well, he's going to keep the Burning Wish.
Yeah, from Mario's point of view, I just like being patient a lot.
Yeah,
Like
this
again,
looks like
he knows that Anuraag's just not going to be pressuring him, right? So he just has all the time in the world to build up a hand. He doesn't have to worry about a counterbalance coming down or some sort of lock piece like in the last matchup. I don't know if you got to catch any of that, but it was kind of a massacre with Aether Vial and Thalia. Like it's just
that
so
pun
hard to beat
intended.
them.
There was no massacre, unfortunately, for Romario. Yeah, and you make a good point about you don't have a counterbalance suddenly representing not really a win condition, but effectively something that just provides overwhelming disruption. And even in the absence of counterbalance, back when Entreat was commonly played, you actually didn't have a good sense of how fast your opponent's clock was. And with Anuraag's Stoneblade Controllers, he can't really take advantage of any of those factors. He'll have to rely on a wall of counter magic, but his mana's going to be bottlenecked here.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we see Anuraag brainstorming at the end step here, which I like. I sort of missed what he kept with the brainstorm, but
Yeah, Anuraag's tossed Batter Skull, and I thought he tossed a land. He kept the Swords to Plowshares, which I'm not sure I agree with, but I might have just seen the wrong screen. He's going to fetch right here on upkeep. As Romario's electing to play patient, just draw go combo magic. Anuraag draws a Ponder. Because he has a Brainstorm, I believe, still in the graveyard, even though we can't see it. Do you think he's going to fire anything off right here?
I still don't think so. What do you think Anuraag's looking for? Did he brainstorm away a Stoneforge Mystic?
I think he brainstormed
Or
away
just
a Batter Skull on the land.
okay?
All right. So end of turn here on Romario's end of turn. Anuraag's going to play in the Snapcaster with the Brainstorm just to establish a little bit of a clock. Got to keep Romario honest. Can't let him wait forever. And Romario being a test deck, much more reliant on ad nauseum, pressing the life total is kind of disruption in a way.
Yeah, I like casting the Snapcaster at end of turn here just to get some sort of clock going.
Yeah.
Like Stoneforge Mystic is not really a great card in this matchup.
Yeah. But
Because it's
I think Anuraag might actually be ahead now. He's drawn 3 Force of Wills, which Tess can certainly beat, but Romario needs to find actual business spells or discard to wear away at that wall of counter magic.
yeah, Romario hasn't drawn any discard spells this entire game yet, so
And even if he draws something like Empty the Warrens naturally, it's going to be a little bit awkward. Burning Wish can go for Past in Flames, but then Anuraag would see that coming, and Anuraag's played enough control decks against Storm Combo that he knows what to bottleneck.
yeah. Well, he's fired off a bunch of probes here, and he knows what he's fighting against.
Mm-hmm. All right, here comes Snapcaster back in for 2 damage. He's going to ship back to Romario, maybe cast a Ponder. I think I might. Well, let's see. You have Hardcast Force of Will available right now. So maybe he elects to pass back, which looks like he does. Romario hasn't missed 1 land drop, 5 lands right here without much action from the Storm player. It's not a good place for him to be. As Anuraag takes his turn, ponders, and sees, I believe, couple fetch lands, draws a Brainstorm.
Which is a pretty good draw.
Yeah. So looks
Like
like
obviously the Swords is a dead card in his hand.
Yeah.
So right now he has Force pitching, Force pitching. So he has 3 Force of Wills available essentially.
Yeah, and a hardcastable one. If he draws a
Yep.
land next turn, he even gets to Snapcaster Force of Will, which is really nice because that means even a therapy that successfully resolves an A's Force of Will doesn't knock everything out of his hand. I wonder if Anuraag's going to try to brainstorm into another land, like land, blue card, counter magic, anything of the sort would be decent.
Yeah.
Because they all enable something. So he's going to fire off that end step brainstorm here.
What do you think about casting Snapcaster at the end step here?
I think it depends on what he hits. And it looks like he found Engineer Explosives and a land. If he had a 7th land, I'd be tempted to hold the Snapcaster in case you want a Snapcaster Force or Snapcaster Snare plus some other stuff. With having drawn a 2nd Snapcaster but no extra land, I would like to fire off a Snapcaster to get that clock on, especially because you could use that Brainstorm.
Right.
Also, this means that next turn he could play a 3rd Snapcaster and present lethal.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Mario, he just hasn't drawn a single discard spell this entire game. Like,
Nope.
I mean, he has the ability to go off, but he's just not going to empty his hand and cast a Burning Wish into what he knows he's playing against 3 Forcibles.
Yes. Well, let's see. He fired off 2 probes. He's seeing at least 2 of them. I believe he's also seeing a third. Pace
Yeah, I
of
think he saw the
action
third one.
moving quite quickly here on our modal screen.
Okay, so he found a Jace off this last brainstorm here.
Yeah, I just consider that a blue card.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to cast it here. I'd just rather leave hard cast Force of Will up.
Mm-hmm. It's hard castable, Force of Will, and a Snare. It looks like Anuraag's going to fetch on his upkeep. I like the patience waiting for upkeep rather than end of turn.
Oh, and there's a counter spell.
Oh, okay, that's really great from him. And do you think he just moves to discard here?
I would just move to discard because he has counterspell, snapcaster counterspell, and all his Force of Wills. So I think I like just discarding here.
Yeah, and it looks like he pitches the one ponder.
Yep, makes sense.
Romario draws ad nauseum, not the namesake of the deck, but the most powerful engine, in my opinion, in TES, despite the fact that its name doesn't reflect it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I just don't see how you can go for it here when you know about 2 pieces of interaction.
Well, Romario feels like he has to go for it now, and he's correct. But barring some punt from Anuraag, which I don't see coming, it looks like Anuraag's going to take game 1. Let's see how Romario decides to sequence. Sometimes, even in a lost cause, you could sequence in a way, see how your opponent reacts to certain things you present, and get some more information about their playstyle for subsequent games. So he's going to play the Mana Rocks first, and then go for Burning Wish.
Yeah, I think it's very likely that Anuraag's going to counter this.
Any reason to use a counterspell rather than a snare, though? Looks like he's hovering over the counterspell. But he elects to go with the snare instead.
Yeah, I like using snare here. Like, obviously now you can't counterspell and snapcaster counterspell, but
certainly he's got plenty of options. All right. Well, looks like Romario just moved to his end of turn, thinking he might have another turn to work with, but
yeah, he did not know about that snapcaster.
Yeah, and 3 snapcaster is actually quite a formidable clock. Doesn't seem like much, but they add up for sure.
Okay, so we're going for the Hail Mary ad nauseum.
Yeah, and I can't even think of any instant speed payoff cards after you've drawn everything. I think at this point you're just revealing extra cards to Anuraag. Granted, the deck lists are publicly available, so I mean he doesn't really lose that much by doing so. But this is just for fun, I guess, entertaining the crowd.
And that should do it.
Yeah. All right.
So they're going towards sideboardings now.
Yeah, and we have each player's screen available. I think from Anuraag's perspective, it's interesting. I think there's a little bit of a guessing game. Is Anuraag going to keep around the Stoneforge package, which makes Empty the Warrens more of a liability? But on the other hand, obviously, you have to figure out what the decision is. Anuraag also has the hedge cards in the form of Kozilek's Return, Supreme Verdict, and best of all, Engineered Explosives as cling answers to Goblin tokens. So he may not want to commit 6 or 4 cards, whatever his Stoneforge package includes, just to hedge against goblins.
Yeah, personally, I would really hate Stoneforge Mystic in this matchup. It's just, it's so slow, and it's so difficult to commit 2 mana to tap out for it. Especially when you have spell snares and counter spells in your deck. It's just not a reliable threat.
Yeah,
like you saw in the last matchup that like all you really need are snapcasters and you have Canonist to beat down. It doesn't really matter what you're beating down with, right? Like you don't need to be doing that 5 a turn.
Yeah, and on Romario's side, he's a more proactive deck, and he has a wish board, so I think he'll have to sideboard fairly sparingly. From Anuraag's side, I'm not sure I like Power Blast a whole lot. I like it a little bit more against Ant than against Test, but I'm not convinced I even like it against Ant.
Surgical Extraction. It depends how many dead cards you have in the main deck, though. Like, if you feel like you have all these dead cards like Stoneforge Mystics and Batter Skulls, like, I certainly like bringing in Pyroblast.
That's very reasonable.
I mean, it just all depends on how many dead cards he has. Like, he's bringing out Swords to Plowshares because he knows that there's no Xanid Swarms in Romario's deck.
Yeah, like having public information, not knowing you don't have to hedge with the Xanid Swarms by keeping in Swords to Plowshares, I think is really useful to know, because otherwise I am terrified of Xanid Swarm. I often keep 3 or 4 copies of Swords against them.
I agree. One of the most difficult thing in this matchup, like when Miracles was still a thing, it was so difficult to sort of know what their sideboard plan was. right? Like a lot of players are running like City of Solitudes and Xanted Swarms, so you always kind of like had to hedge a little bit. So you had
Yeah.
to leave in a couple swords for a possibility of Xanted Swarm, your wear and tear for the possibility of something like City of Solitude. But again, with public information, it's a lot easier to sideboard from Anuraag's perspective, I think.
Yeah. Now this is interesting. Surgical extraction. When I played Miracles against Ant, I often really loved the surgicals. I'd board in 2 or up to 3 copies if I had that many, but I actually did not like it against Tess. That being said, this is not Miracles that Anuraag's playing. In fact, it's labeled not Miracles.
That's right.
And he may think that, okay, you counter one business spell, you could surgically extract extra copies of it away in a long game because you don't have something like counterbalance, which closes out the game in a more permanent fashion. So what do you think of surgical extraction here from Anuraag?
I think it comes down again to how many dead cards you have. In general, I do like it in the matchup. Just even the benefit you get from knowing what their hand is and knowing what you have to play around is like such a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Like because there's a lot of like scary situations that can come up, right? Like sometimes you're just playing very carefully. They might play like a duress at some point, and you don't really know what they're building towards. And just having that free information is just so helpful because it knows what you need to counter, right?
True. Also, it's less of a liability when it's not an Ant deck playing, let's say, Rodrigo Torgores' strategy of just boarding into multiple, like 3 to 4 copies of Tendrils of Agony.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah.
Yeah. Romario here kept a 7, which is solid but not spectacular. Anuraag had a Moa 7 that was garbage. And here he has a no-lander with 2 Force of Wills. He's got a free Scry. I think this is borderline. I mean, it's greedy, but I don't know, mulling to 5. Looks like he kept the land on top, so...
These are hands I like to keep. These no lander scry hands.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I certainly feel much better against, let's say, Belcher than Tess with it, but I don't think your 5 is getting better than this.
Oh, and it looks like Anuraag scried the perfect card to a top.
Volcanic Island.
Volcanic Island. And Romario's going to see the hand that
Well, also,
Anuraag kept.
You don't play Magic online, and you can't see the log, but each player has a log available. He knows Anuraag scry at the top, so it has to be a land.
Right.
So draw here from Romario was a Dark Ritual. That means next turn he has enough mana to let's go 3, 5. Lion's Eye Diamond. So he has a lot of options, but he'll have to punch through 2 Force of Will, so he can't go up quite yet. Found a Cabal Therapy. That's exactly what he was looking for.
Yeah, from a different perspective though, again, Romario knows exactly what he's fighting against, and all Anuraag has is 2 Force of Will. So if he finds like a Cabal Therapy see, there's a perfect card, right?
Yeah, actually, this just got a little confusing. On our screen, we saw Romario on top and Anuraag on bottom, but then the board state got flipped. So I'm trying to reorient myself as. Okay, thank you so much. He kept the Ponder and included the Cabal Therapy and 2 cards. Thanks a lot for that comment.
Yeah, so this is a really great draw for Romario here.
Yeah. Oh, and he's also found a Gitaxian Probe. It's not really going to do much other than build Storm. I wonder if Anuraag's going to fire off this Pyroblast.
I was just about to ask you the same question.
I think I do, because I'm kind of bottlenecked on mana right now, and I might be moving to discard next turn, or at least having to tap a cantrip. So I think I do fire this off. Also, I personally don't like Pyroblast that much against Tess at all, so if I could just fire that off and trade with something, I will take that exchange.
I actually probably Pyroblast or Mental Misstep probes way more often than I should be, just because it's such a stupid card.
That's true. Mental Misstep, not something you could play anymore outside of Vintage, but it is spectacular there. Okay, Anuraag is gonna respond to the Cabal Therapy by pitching 1 Force to get rid of the Ponder. Now he has to brainstorm and see what he finds. Plains Engineer Explosives. So he's
basically locked because he can't cast Counterspell at this point.
Yeah, now the question is, how do you resolve this? You might... Okay, so Romario kept. So that means it's either Gas or probably Disruption, because Romario probed on turn 1, knew he had to beat 2 Force of Wills. Do you actually play the leveling game and hide the Force Will on top and hope that Romario's trying to punch through Cabal Therapy?
I actually like hiding the Force of Will right here.
Yeah. I'm also wondering if you cast the Engineer Explosive, your Anuraag, you expose that to what would be Abrupt Decay, but I don't think Romario has any in his list. And then you get to snipe any goblins, which you certainly could do on your turn, but now you're more mana efficient. And if Romario tries to go off of 2 LEDs, which we know that he has in hand, you could disrupt it by popping the first one with the second one on the stack.
Well, one of the big advantages that this version of Storm
Mm-hmm.
Tez has gotten is the fact that they don't necessarily need to be running Abrupt Decay anymore
True.
for permanents like Counterbalance. So they get to
Uh-huh.
run like a much more leaner mana base, because part of the issues with the deck before is that you're running all these red rituals and black cards, and you need to be sideboarding in Abrupt Decay in this kind of matchup.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
fact
the
that
mana base was quite strained.
so the mana base is just overall a lot less strained. And looks like Romario picked up Chain of Vapor here.
Yeah, that's a good way to hedge against Canis, and I actually like that more than a lot of the other hedge cards because it's a second or maybe a tertiary storm generator in a pinch if you need it. Anuraag here found a Ponder, which will let him turn on at least some of his hand if he finds the right cards. I think I saw a Ponder and a Preordain. And he shuffles and hits a Force of Will.
And picks up a Force of Will, so he has double protection here.
Yeah, now plays the Engineer Explosives because he would otherwise have to move to discard.
Yep, which is fine because he has Kozilek's Return and Pyroclasm for possible empties.
Yeah.
So he doesn't need to be worrying about that too much. And Romario picks up Duress here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a question. Do you Infernal Tutor to get another Duress?
I think that's probably a good idea, although you'd be running into surgical extraction blowouts if you took that line. You may consider leading with Dark Ritual. I'd have to work out the math. And then playing Therapy for, well, that's still run. You can't, yeah, that wouldn't work anyway because you'd be running into surgical extraction before you could play one of your Duresses followed by an Inferno Tutor anyway.
I think it's unlikely for Anuraag to have, like, obviously we know the hands, but I think it's fairly unlikely Anuraag has surgical in his hand unless he picked it up off the Ponder, because he saw his hand a couple turns back. So unless he picked up surgical from the Brainstorm and the blind Ponder shuffle.
Yeah, I believe as far as Romario knows, the one counterspell, one force, one batter skull are unknowns, and possibly the engineer explosive that got played on the board.
And he knows about one of the sweepers too, right?
Yeah, I think he saw both sweepers on the turn 1 Jataxian probe, although I'm struggling to remember the game state that far back. So here's a Inferno Tutor. It's going to go for the Duress. One Duress is going to get fired off. I think if you're Anuraag, you might just fire this off just to bluff. But he's not going to do that. And we have a... Are you seeing the same thing I am? Oh, okay. I see. My wheel is spinning incorrectly, and now there's a big Mickey Mouse on the screen. Excellent production work here. My camera may suck, but my layout is awesome, Michael. And now Romario is just going off 2 LEDs. Here's a Infernal Tutor on the stack, and I think he can even go Burning Wish directly for Tendrils at this point.
Yeah, I wasn't following the storm count, but that's
it's displayed here occasionally on the right side of Magic Online.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure what prompts it to pop up sometimes, but not others. But now we do see it.
So we can just go directly Burning Wish into Tendrils.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, Romario has the option to showboat if he wants to go for ad nauseum and try to get this massive grape shot going. But and I guess if you're on Legacy Premier League, sometimes it's nice to do sweet things. Let's see what he looks to go for.
Personally, I like the grape shot plan.
You like the grape shot? Well, you might lose the game and feel kind of stupid if that happens.
Ooh. Well, he knows his hand, right?
Well, he went for the Inferno Tutor.
Well, it's the same thing. He just...
Oh, there's a main deck Tendrils now, or he boarded it in?
I think he has one Tendrils in the sideboard and one main. Is that right?
Okay. Let me see if I get that list pulled up again. I was under the impression that Tess stopped running main deck Tendrils, but certainly it's a very fluid deck that can change.
No, so it looks like just one copy of Tendrils.
Okay, and he brought it in.
Yeah, and interestingly, he didn't. He still has both copy of Empty the Warrens in the sideboard because he knows about Anuraag sweepers. He knows about the Engineer Explosives and the Kozilek's Return and Pyroclasm, and I I think
Yeah.
Anuraag might be just overboarding here in fear of empty. I know when I used to play this matchup from the Miracle side, I mean, I like maybe having 1 or 2 copies of Terminus, also as
Oh,
a
I
hedge against
feared.
Anted Swarm. But
I kept like 5 or 6 white cards in for this matchup
yeah,
because
but
I
you're a
was so
maniac.
down with blasts. True. Looks like Romario did that, what you mentioned, a swap of the Empty the Warrens for Tendrils of Agony, which I think makes the Burning Wish a little bit more awkward. So he cut a Ponder to have, like, I guess, kind of an action spell if he gets flooded too heavily on Wishes, but doesn't have enough mana to build into Dark Petition.
Hmm
But looks
What
like
do you think about Anuraag cutting all the Jaces here?
ooh, I don't like Jace against Ant very much from the Miracles perspective, but I think you need a way to get ahead. And Miracles had its predicts, its counterbalances, etc. I think I like Jace's more than Red Blast because they're at least blue cards.
I
Uh,
tend to agree with that.
and you saw your opponent, interestingly, Inferno tutor for Tendrils. So that was not in the sideboard. So maybe that might clue you into the fact that uh, Romario might have cut his Empty the Warrens, although that doesn't necessarily mean you can't see it because Burning Wish for it's still a possibility.
Okay, so Romario is not a maniac and doesn't keep a zero lander. He keeps a pretty reasonable hand here. He has Probe, Duress, and Cantrip.
Yeah. So at stake here, Anuraag. So we're going to game 3. So either Anuraag wins or Romario's going to go 2-1. As looks like there was a ponder and a keep from Anuraag. So Anuraag has clinched his spot either way, but Romario's drawing dead for survival. But he's playing for pride here. If he wins, I guess Michael Bonde and Anuraag are advancing anyway, and
Hmm
Romario's playing for third versus fourth,
Yep.
which means he'll be in either the tiebreaker round or. Okay, so Anuraag's definitely in the wild card race. Romario's trying to play to not get eliminated outright.
Yep. And we saw that Romario main phase brainstorm on turn 1 here,
Yeah.
which I like. He knows about Anuraag's Red Blast,
Huh?
and it's just better to get. He has a fetch line anyway, so he has the ability to shuffle away dead cards,
Yeah.
even though it's not the optimal brainstorm.
hmm
But
Also, test players main phase turn 1 brainstorms much more aggressively than other decks, especially let's say a Miracles deck, where your brainstorms are not only card manipulation, but they also set up your terminuses and are dismisses in conjunction with counterbalance. Tess often plays it really quickly because there's a potential for a turn 1 kill.
yep, I totally agree.
Here's a ponder from Romario.
Okay, so what is Anuraag working with here? He has Counterspell, Force, Brainstorm, Snare.
Yes, and I'm not sure what he has on top of his library, but if it's a bad card, he has a fetch land available. Um, wow, Romario brought in Surgical Extraction. I guess
which which I actually kind of like, surprisingly enough, because normally I hate a card like that, but he knows Anuraag is playing with a set amount of permission, right? Like he knows he's playing with X counter spells and X force of wills,
and Quad
and
Snapcaster, yeah.
and quad snapcaster. So I mean, it can be quite a blowout card, especially if he's aware of Anuraag's hand. For example, like if he had double force of will in hand, he could open up with a duress and surgical the other. It's
Ooh,
just when you're
triple counterspell.
well, this is what I'm talking about, right? So like
Yeah,
if he leads with duress here, takes a counter spell and then surgical is the other. It's leaving Anuraag in a semi bad spot. Like he still has force plus snare, but
yeah. So I actually think Surgical against Miracles gets ridiculed more often than it should. I think it's actually decent in many situations when you can outground your opponent. One
mhm.
example, I think Extirpate from Ant was very good against Miracles,
Yep.
as long as you didn't, as long as you had a plan to not get destroyed by counterbalance, being because a one drop is such liability against counterbalance.
Well, the one
However,
thing with extirpate though is that it also messed up with your top. So for
yeah,
example, if you're hiding like a fluster storm on top, you could extirpate in response to the Sensei's Divine Top draw ability,
exactly.
and that was
Yeah,
okay. So Anurag did
floating
leave
it.
in some Stoneforge Mystics this time, which is interesting.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, Romario's got a window to resolve duress and surgical extraction, if he wants, at significant cost to Anuraag's hand, but he doesn't really. Well, let's see. He has triple Burning Wish, which is essentially 9 mana plus 8 mana, barring Anuraag having something like a surgical extraction at his disposal, and a Burning Wish, so he can make a lot of goblins, but that doesn't line up very well against Batterskull anymore. Um, Romario does pick up the very powerful Ad Nauseam, but it doesn't have double black source to enable that.
Yep. Yeah, these red rituals in his hand are just kind of awkward if he had a dark ritual in the spot.
Yeah, so Romario's going to lead off with the Duress. Is there any chance he goes for the Batterskull instead after seeing this hand? Probably not because of the surgical extraction, but that might be a possibility as well.
I mean, his hand is so bad though. Like, he knows that Anurag's hand doesn't do anything in terms of applying pressure. Like one a turn is a lot of time. Um, I I actually kind of like taking Batterskull here.
Yeah,
What do you
I think
think?
that's actually very reasonable, and it's not an intuitive play. But if you've played a lot of control versus combo, you often recognize that the clock is what you actually have to worry about.
Yeah, yeah. Like five a turn is just so much different than one Snapcaster beating you down.
Oh wow, looks like Anurag is actually going to try to protect his hand. I don't know if he values the Batterskull more or the information, but it's going to be a Force Will pitch and counter spell, and this actually renders him much safer against the surgical extraction in Romario's hand. Wow, what a heads up play by Anurag,
Yeah,
especially
that
with
was a
no
good
information.
that was a really good play by Anurag. I
I
don't
mean,
know if a lot of players would have forced there.
I um I would have considered it, known that was an option, but not done it, and I would have probably gotten punished for that. So impressive play there from Anurag. Here's a surgical extraction. Mario's firing this off first on the Force of Will. Couple reasons for that. One is to find out if the coast is clear. The other
Well,
is, sorry.
he didn't fire off a probe this game. Yeah, he fired off a probe, so he knows about the counter spell and the spell snare. I think why he's doing this is he's hoping that Anurag counterspells it.
That's a good point as well. Also, he may have to just go off this turn because the ad nauseums get much weaker, as well as any burning witch line once the Batterskull actually enters play and starts hitting for 4.
Right. So how much mana is Romario working with right now? He has
He's got
3 Rite of Flames.
that's 9 mana after tapping the island.
Volcanic.
The sea makes it 10, and then the volcanic island. The sea makes it 10, and the pedal makes it 11.
Okay, so he can Burning Wish and Ad Nauseam here, which is interesting.
Actually, I think I might be off on the count. So
So just wait.
3, 5, 7. No, it's 7 mana. Sorry,
Yeah, 7 mana
7
plus
mana
the pedal.
including the volcanic island initial investment. So 9 mana total.
Hmm. So he can Burning Wish and Ad Nauseam here, but he knows that Anurag is working with Spell Snare and Counterspell, which answer both his action spells cleanly.
Yeah, I think you might. I mean, I think this is an example of Test being a very hard deck to play. I think it's harder than Ant, which is already sufficiently hard that I don't think anyone pilots it perfectly. And right now he has to decide how he wants to proceed, whether there are lines that open Anurag to making a mistake with some kind of bluff because of this asymmetry of information. Possibly just jamming a Burning Wish to find a discard spell if he still has one left in his sideboard, or just a ponder, but he's going to pass the turn instead.
Well, I don't think he's going to fire off a Burning Wish here because and Flusterstorm.
Yeah,
He knows about the Spell Snare, right?
yeah, he does know about the spell snare.
Yes,
Unless got
because he just
brainstormed away
surgical
out there
last
too.
turn, so he knows exactly what Anurag's working with, except for the Flusterstorm.
Yeah,
And
hey, this is a pretty good one.
yeah, and he's going to see the Flusterstorm,
Yeah.
which is bad news for Romario.
So, and he's on a 2-turn clock, so he has to get moving. This Flusterstorm. Actually, I like using the counterspell instead. It's unknown. It's known from Romario, so you could still hide that Flusterstorm. Also, if Romario naturally draws empty the warrants, first of all, it's not very good against Pyroclasm or Batterskull, but a natural storm spell gets punished by this Flusterstorm. Here's an attack for 5, dropping Romario to 5 and bringing Anurag up to 27.
So he has to beat Spell Snare and Flusterstorm this turn.
Mm-hmm. Anurag's going to play out his last land. Here's a Duress.
Oh,
and this is awkward
so
because
awkward.
the mana is such an issue. And if Well,
He can't ad nauseum and Burning Wish.
no, but he could buy himself some time, I guess. Oh, but the therapy's gone too.
Yeah,
Okay.
the therapy's gone too. Like I think Anuraag just lets this resolve and hope for the best, but it's not going to work out for Romario, I don't think.
Yeah. Here's a
Okay, Fluster.
Flusterstorm. It's
Yeah, I
going
think
to
if
counter the Duress, and Sprite of Flame being the sorcery means you can't even play instant speed shenanigans to ensure that your Duress gets through.
kind of
Um,
unfortunate for Romario because I think if he had one more turn, he would have been able to go off because he could
yeah,
ad nauseum and well, I guess he's such at a low life total now too that ad nauseum isn't nearly as effective. But
nope.
here
Although
comes a spell
Tess
snare.
obviously has great ad nauseums, but you need to have things available. And it looks like the Spell Snare is going to clinch the match for Anuraag does.
Yeah, pretty well played by Anurag. I agree with most of the
Yeah,
decisions he made in that match.
yeah, extremely well played. I mean, if you're an exceptional Miracles player as he was, a lot of the principles are going to still translate, even if the deck itself is dead. So looks like Anurag is going to be second place. Romario, ooh, so
Oh,
poll right here. We've 35% of the viewers got this right. Michael Bonde takes first place with its death and taxes. But looks like Anurag is in second and Patrick is in third.
yeah.
All right.
How do you feel about the matchup? Like, how do you feel about Anurag's deck, just the way it's built and its ability to fight combo? Like, I know just with talking with them and other people, there's a lot of like debates and discussions about how to fight fair decks and combo decks on sort of the same level as Miracles used to do.
Yeah.
So
Anurag
just
asked
with
me
the
to
way it's constructed.
Anurag asked me to play a couple games of Ant against him just for practice, and I'm not the best Ant player, but I've have reps with the deck in the past. I
Yeah.
feel like with the sideboard, including three Canis as well as a wall of counter magic, it can potentially put up some fight. I still feel like really a highly skilled Storm player is going to be favored, but I don't think it's terrible just because there is so much counter magic that is available from turn one and ways to deal with
Well,
empty the warrants getting underneath you as well as
the
cannon
big
missiles.
the big thing too is just having a diverse suite of counter magic. Like
Yes,
when you're just dealing with just strictly forcibles and dazes, it's a lot easier to play around.
I
Um,
agree.
as opposed when you're bringing in stuff like spell snares and fluster storms and counter spells and snapcaster mages, like it makes the matchup a lot better for a control deck post board, especially.
Yeah, certainly. If Romario had access to something like Xanted Swarm, well, obviously Anurag would have hedged with a couple of Source of Plowshares. But if he had something like a City of Solitude Defense Grid, which are not really commonly played in tests, that I think that would have given Anurag a lot more problems.
Yep. And it looks like Michael Bonde finished up in 3-0. So good
Yeah,
for him. I
impressive
don't know if he
finish.
caught any of the early games, but
Unfortunately, I was at
you know,
work, so I was unable to do so. Not surprised though. I mean, I think Death and Taxes is one of the best decks in the format. Very good in this field, and he's certainly one of the best pilots in the world with that deck, if not the best.
yeah, he really showcased off his skill with the deck, and I think that's the big thing. I mean, a lot of people play Death and Taxes, but when you can play it at that kind of level, like it's very scary to play against, especially from a controls perspective, as we saw against Anurag.
Yeah. Did someone in chat just ask me if Jarvis, you is my brother? I must have. Well, we're one of 8 siblings, 6 brothers, 2 sisters from the Daisy Hill Puppy Farm.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. But
Anyway,
yeah, that
it's
was really exciting magic, man. I wish the Premier League was every single day, not just Thursdays. But now we have
yeah. Personally, I always like control mirrors against combo decks. I think it's like super interesting, just how to
yeah,
sequence your spells and play around counter magic. I just find makes for interesting games.
yeah. It was one of my favorite matches to play from either the Miracle side or the Ant side. The matches where neither player goes turn one top, turn two counterbalance, or turn one win. Just a lot of really intricate decisions at work. What you're floating, and in fact, Senses Vine top from the Ant deck was very scary as well for the Miracles player.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. But we're in a new world order now. Legacy, I think, is going to be an interesting place as the metagame shakes out a little bit more. Uh, And it looks like this concludes the matches for the day. So I just wanted to thank all of you guys for tuning in, as well as thank our sponsors from Card and Magics and Card Hoarders for making this possible.
And also thanks to the people that got us to do the commentary today, Anuraag Das.
Total blast.
Okay, thanks so much for watching, guys.
Yeah, take care. See you next week. Wow.